Okay.
news thing.
Now we're going. Okay.
Cool.
So we can, we should do that, and we can do clips. It's funny. So I was talking to my
They
dad.
run better
actually.
in the algorithms.
Yeah, and so I was talking to my dad who listens and he likes it.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't hold punches. He's like, they're too long.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that's interesting.
Yep.
I almost won't listen to something unless it's like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Which is I think there's a very specific age range that you and I happen to be in, which is like the younger but not youngest millennials.
Yeah.
Who I think kind of got into podcasting predominantly, I think, because of Rogan and the Rogan sphere.
Yeah, I agree.
And I, again, like, if it's a 40-minute podcast, that almost says to me that it's like too produced and transactional, and it's almost more like a cable news show. But my dad is like, it is like, if it's over 40 minutes, he's like, you're the only podcast I would listen to that's because of that. And he doesn't lie. He doesn't lie. He's just like, and I tune out half of it. Yeah. He's like, it's too long. Yeah. And I'm like, that's interesting.
I'm the same way. I like longer, but your dad is right that like it plays better for the base consumer. Yeah. Right. And that's why everyone does it.
Right.
I prefer the longer form stuff. I think a lot of people like us perform the longer form stuff. I think like any of the real like intellectual discussions on things going on right now, or like really high level analysis of political and cultural trends, you need those to be longer, right? And I see most of the people that I listen to that usually go like an hour to an hour and a half seems to be kind of the default. You'll get longer episodes, depending on who they're speaking to or like what topic they're talking about. But I think the more curated 45-minute, 50, 55-minute, it seems to be sort of the business plan for a lot of these people who they start a platform with no backing and then they get a few sponsors. Yeah. And then after that they sign a Spotify deal or an iTunes deal or a deal with whoever. And then it becomes almost a formulaic 55 minutes every single time with like interspersed ad breaks, and it feels more like a radio show.
It does,
or
it definitely has the
a
radio
news broadcast if it's more of a political thing. And I think that's why a lot of these content creators who want to preserve their long form stuff. Tim Pool has Timcast, which is like an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours long, but he does his clips throughout the day. And
that's definitely the way you advertise it. You get new listeners. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I've been doing some research with some people I know that do like social media marketing and branding like professionally, and they're like, you need to saturate your market with more digestible, like shorter clips for people. So I think that would be a good way to go, and I think we should start doing that.
Yeah. No, that's smart.
Because you can still keep the full episode, and when a lot of people do. Someone who I don't really listen to that much, because even though I still agree with a lot of he says, I just find him annoying. It's Dave Rubin.
Sure.
And like I love what he says, but like he's kind of annoying.
He's like a nerd.
Yeah, he's a nerd. Yeah, and anyone and
I'm on the exact same wavelength.
Yeah, and like the internet intellectual,
and I like Dave Rubin.
Yeah, I like him too. The intellectual dark web, I like all the guys say cool things, but it's like a nerd clique. And
there's a little too much fart sniffing.
Yeah. Yes.
But I'll take it.
Yeah. Whatever. But everyone seems to. Rubin's just one example. Tim Pool's another example. Everyone seems to do the thing where they record a video. Maybe they do a live stream. Maybe they don't. Then they release clips for a couple of days. Yep. And then after they release clips for a couple of days, then you get the full bulk episode that you can watch. I don't know if it's a chicken or the egg kind of thing. It's like, were they going to do that anyway to boost their numbers, or did they do that because they needed to conform to the market of the platform?
Right.
You know?
Right. It's probably a little. I mean, it's both too, and kind of we're at the. It's funny. I was listening to actually. So I'm a massive Kirk Minahan fan.
Yeah, you told me.
It's funny. He just did he's doing like a true crime podcast now.
That's fun.
It's cool. What's cool about it, and which I like a lot and appreciate about it, is what he talks about is, he does his show, which is funny. It's like irreverent. He's like it's political because it's not political, kind of, which I like. But anyway, he just talks openly about, he's like, I've been on the radio for like 6 years, and then I've been on doing this podcast for like 2 years, and it's great, and the universe is awesome, and whatever. But like, I want to do something else. I like true crime. This is what I want to do. I know it's not super, whatever. On the one hand, it's like 8 of the top 10 podcasts are true crime. Yeah. So it's like, yes, part of this is we can reach a big audience, get awesome numbers, get sponsors who will be into, like Taser sponsors. The
largest, I mean, also it's worth, and this is like data that comes from like Facebook and Instagram, like the largest consumer group with the most engagement, both on the platform and off platform in terms of buying products, are women. Yeah. And women love true crime.
They do, yeah.
And like, it doesn't matter if it comes from like Kirk Minahan.
Yeah, right.
If you put on a Kirk Minahan thing and it's true crime, the thing where normally your girlfriend or your wife would tune it out or go do something else because they don't want to hear your dude podcast, they'll be like, oh, this is spooky murder time. Yes. Let's listen to it.
I know.
Right?
Yes.
And so it makes sense that like it has a huge base because dudes love crime and murder too.
Yeah. It's and it's cool, and I'm happy I'm a Minifan as they say, which is nerdy, but whatever. Is what's cool about it is the case is a cold case that hasn't been solved, and they're basically solving it in real time. Yeah, which is really cool because it's not. So it's sort of more like did you listen to Serial?
No,
neither did I. My sense, I listened to one true crime podcast, which was called Stranglers, which was about the Boston Strangler. Which was okay, and I think it was pretty good. It was a little, it's like it's a little too like NPR-y for me, and that whole genre's NPR-y for me, which I don't love, but I also kind of get it and understand it. And it was good. It was entertaining. I listened to the whole thing, but it was definitely like, I was talking to one of our friends about it because he listened to it too, and he's more into like true crime or whatever. And it's kind of like, it's almost like that Chris Farley joke where, the Chris Farley, Paul McCartney talk show, SNL skit, where it's like, oh, remember that time? Like, remember Hey Jude? Wasn't that awesome?
Wasn't that awesome?
Yeah, like, it's kind of like that with true crime, where they're like, oh, remember the Boston Strangler thing? That was crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember being scared to walk home at night?
Yeah, and that's kind of what it is. Like, the theme is almost like, oh man, isn't that crazy? Like,
and
this
could happen again.
Yeah, like, it's not. So what I like about,
might still be out there.
Yeah, and it's not. Well, but what I like about the case is that, and that's the name of the show, is like, so they released so they're doing it. It's not like finished. They're like they did like a year's work of like research and have like a shit ton of sound. Like they just released like the first episode, and because of the release of the first episode, like and now like it changed the set. Like they don't have the next episode ready to go yet until it comes out on Monday. And like as a result of them releasing the first episode, like this person in the case like has been named a person of interest and is like now being actually invested. Like so, there's like a real crazy possibility that like they actually like solved the case in real time. Yeah. Which is like, oh, that's different. That's not like, oh, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I mean, previously you needed like the family of the victims to like win court battles, or like a documentarian or film company to take an interest in it and actually like invest time and resources to like do the legwork to dig up all the information to get like public pressure. Now, like if you have someone with the platform with tens of thousands or several 100,000 listeners, just talking about it and getting it trending in enough circles is going to generate that buzz. Yeah. Right? Yeah. I mean, the cops just like that, as we know, they're not the brightest and they're not the most motivated. So if
you should listen to it. It's a good.
I'm not saying that they're all dumb. I know, but in terms of like, why are they going to chase ghosts when there are like real crimes for them to go out and solve? Like what are you going to have? Like how many resources are you going to devote to cold cases?
Well, this is what's really cool about this.
Like most homicide departments in the U.S. have like a 20% case clearance rate, like in high crime areas where there's a significant amount of homicide, like Miami, Chicago, L.A., New York, whatever. So it's good that there's a reason for them to actually go after these people.
Yeah.
Because previously, what are you gonna do?
So it's very interesting, and although I don't mind, right? We can turn this in. This is what's nice. We can turn this.
I figure we
into
can
things.
pivot criminal justice into.
But yeah, we could.
Elephant in the room.
Well, which one?
The Chauvin.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Fair enough. Yeah, I actually wasn't thinking of that, but I'm happy.
Oh, I didn't think of it until you said true crime. I'm like, yeah, this will be fun.
I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah, he's gonna get off.
But real quick, he didn't murder George Floyd.
Get off, yeah.
He also didn't murder George Floyd.
Yeah.
Which, again, whatever. We'll talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the so what makes Kirk, and I don't need to blow Kirk the whole time, but what makes Kirk in that show and the case so good is he's very upfront. He's like, the other side of like true crime is like they're all fairly or understandably like biased.
Yeah.
It's like, he's like, you watch Making a Murderer, and Making a Murderer is like, oh shit, they completely framed this guy. But then there was someone did a follow-up or whatever.
Yeah.
And the other one was like, nope, they definitely fucking did it.
Yeah.
And it's like,
So that I never watched it, so I can't really speak that in depth on it. But from what I was told by the people I knew who watched it, is that there was a really there's a really good chance he did it. They couldn't prove he did it. These people framed him, which caused him to do some crazy shit.
Yeah.
Which gave the police more of a reason to think he did it and investigate him, which completely nixed his chances of being exculpated from this.
So why Making a Murder? Yeah. Okay, why Making a Murder is I'm gonna say two things. So I have two threads around this. Why Making a Murderer is interesting is that Stephen Avery did kill that woman. Definitely.
Yeah.
But they couldn't prove it. So the interesting thing is, and I have my opinion, and my opinion involves, the thing that is interesting about that case is that, is it moral to fabricate evidence to put away a murderer? Or the flip side of that, is it moral to not fabricate evidence to allow a murderer to go free?
Well, that's
what's interesting about it.
Well, doesn't this translate well into what we had just mentioned?
It does.
Right?
Yeah.
Is sufficient public pressure or public opinion enough to waive the standards of justice on which our legal framework is bound? Now, I spent a lot of time talking about all this legal framework is bullshit anyway.
I know, and I'm a populist. It's a really word.
So,
you've turned me,
let's
by the
put,
way, but
exactly.
Well, I shouldn't say that.
So,
I'm still a conservative.
Yeah.
But my instincts are more similar to yours.
Taking that and putting it aside, let's say I do believe in the legal framework in which our entire society is built, right?
Yes. Let's assume a just system.
Yes, let's assume a just legal system, right? Is sufficient public belief, I won't even say evidence or not.
No, it's belief.
Is sufficient public belief in someone's guilt enough to waive our notions of justice, right? And in the case of Stephen Avery, it was, right? In the case of Stephen Avery, he did it, but they could not prove it. It's not what everyone knows. The cops know who all the drug dealers are. The cops know who's committing most of the violent crimes in their area.
Yes.
There's a standard of proof, right?
Absolutely.
And it's not just to defend like criminals and murderers. It's to defend like me and you and like regular law-abiding citizens, right? And like we have equal protections under the law, under the 10th Amendment, right? So like, so whether you like it or not, like that standard exists for good and bad, right? So in the case of Stephen Avery, everyone Netflix and the documentarians and millions of people in America all thinking he's a murderer and tweeting about him and hashtagging about him was enough for that standard to be bent. Enough, right?
Right.
And it's difficult to say because if Avery hadn't geeked out and done whatever weirdo bullshit he did, like he tried to attack somebody or showed up in someone's driveway or some shit.
Yeah, I mean the guy,
or something like that. That's pretty.
They
damning.
got him on something else.
So
that was maybe manufactured and whatever.
So if he hadn't done that, who's to say whether or not like things would have gone the same way it did? Regardless, it's worth looking at for the Chauvin case, right? Like it is. If you watch, and it's because there's two different movies being played right now. Like if you actually watch the live streams and you actually read the legal analyses from like National File and places that do like legal review, and then you watch the television news coverage on it, or you go on Twitter or any social media and you read from the corporate press what's going on, you're getting two completely different ideas of what's happening.
Certainly.
And what I saw a good analogy was if you're watching a boxing match and the commentators covering the match only talk about when fighter A lands a punch and they never talk about when fighter B lands any punches, and then when the fight ends and fighter B wins, everyone who's watching is going to say, no, I know he lost. I know fighter A won.
Yeah.
Because that's the only thing being reported.
Right.
And like, especially with what they had, what was the guy's name? Mercel, the lieutenant from the MPD, who was the use of force trainer. So
yes.
They had him, and then they had the lady officer who's like their medical expert.
Yes.
Like, they just fucking got eviscerated. Like, the defense used the same pictures and the same evidence on cross that was used by the prosecution to get them to admit, I don't have the specifics in front of me, but...
No, you're keep going. You're right.
Trying to remember.
The overwhelming evidence suggests that...
Oh, I remember.
Yeah.
So the use of force trainer confirmed, in conjunction with the testimony of the MMA fighter guy, that a blood choke involves depressing both carotid arteries.
Right.
And that's what the MMA guy was testifying would have killed him, and they were saying the knee on the neck would have killed him. And if both carotid arteries are depressed, typically they go unconscious within about 10 to 15 seconds.
Right.
Which George Floyd didn't.
Did not.
Right?
Yeah, there was no unconscious... There did not seem to be...
Yeah. No, he did go unconscious.
Oh, he did? Okay.
He did go unconscious eventually. He was not conscious for all 9 minutes. I don't know exactly when he went unconscious, but it certainly wasn't between 10 to 20 seconds.
You know more about the details more than I do.
As far as the medical officer, they were testifying about how officers are trained to do CPR and resuscitative things and how they have an obligation to try to keep suspects alive. However, on cross, the defense caught her in getting her to confirm that the officers are only obligated to do that once they have secured their safety and the area, right?
Yep.
And that if the officers have reason to believe for their safety, they are in no way obligated to render aid to anybody. And they got her to admit that a bunch of people standing around filming you and yelling at you and saying expletives and threatening you would be grounds to not render aid, right?
Right.
And also admitted that it is department mandated procedure that if that's happening, that EMS can't actually go into the scene.
Right.
That they have to secure the scene before they can get
dangerous.
EMS there, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is not to say that like I necessarily agree with that policy,
right?
But that is the policy that has been set by the police department, which is a downstream function of your local government.
That's right.
So, like Minneapolis, for anyone who doesn't know, is a Democratic stronghold in the state of Minnesota.
Yep.
I believe that's where Ilhan Omar is from. She's not the Minneapolis district, but she's one of the
Keith
ones right next to Keith Ellison.
I mean, it's a blue state.
It's a deep blue state, and like these policies weren't made like in Alabama or Texas or Florida. Like these are, and if that's the case, and if the use of force expert is nullifying the testimony of the MMA guy that says they choked him to death, and he's also confirming that the techniques that were used are used very frequently, and like the recovery position is not possible under these circumstances. I don't see how these were like wins for the prosecution. But if you go into the news and you read the articles, they cherry pick a few quotes and it is a win. And like people are going to geek out when he doesn't get murder, because he's definitely not getting the murder charge.
No, there's no.
And me and you can sit here and we can talk about academically how like there's not enough criteria under reasonable doubt for manslaughter, but that doesn't mean the jury's going to agree with us. You know.
Yeah. So I was watching for another podcast I like, Quantum Week, which I like. I was watching Training Day, and Training Day is I like Training Day a lot. Training Day is actually I think it's an okay movie with really good performances that make it a better movie.
It's like a 7 out of 10, but the performances and the cinematography and all those things
it feels awesome.
It feels much,
But the point I want to make is that one of the cool the script actually kind of sucks, and like there's a lot of weirdness and unnecessary pieces of the plot. But one piece where the script is really strong is the Denzel Washington character, which is part of it, is conditioning the Ethan Hawke character through the whole movie.
Yeah,
and it's and that's the point, and it's a little bit of it's kind of a message hammer that I think about it again. But when I watched it, even from the beginning scenes, he's presenting a narrative, and not only is he, but that's not enough. It's not enough that he is explaining reality as he sees it to influence the Ethan Hawke character. He forces the Ethan Hawke character to participate in that narrative.
Correct.
And the couple examples that I can think of are at the beginning of the movie when they first meet in the diner. He says to Ethan Hawke, "Tell me a story." He says to Ethan Hawke, you know, "Oh, you had a woman supervisor, like you definitely tapped that ass. You definitely like, you know, you did this, didn't you? You believed this, didn't you?" He's and part of that is a normal disproportionate power dynamic around, you know, mentor and mentee. Obviously, and there's always some of that. You know, there's a next scene where he gets him to, you know, smoke weed. He says, "You have to do this. This is part of to be a good narc drug cop. You have to have drugs in your system." But he actively he almost gets there. He gets to the threshold, but he doesn't actually, you know, put the pipe in his mouth. Like, he makes the Ethan Hawke character participate in the gaslighting. When they need to kill Roger, you know, he gives them the gun and says, and part of that is the framing, whatever. Yeah. But he says, "You do it, you do it, you do it, you do it."
Well, he's trying to recruit him most of the time.
Yeah.
And the framing serves as an insurance policy.
Yes.
And that when he realizes he's not going to flip him, that's when he's like, okay.
Yeah, that's when that's almost the climax of the movie.
Yeah.
But the point is, and this is where it feeds into. This is where it feeds into. So it's not just the announcer telling you that boxer A is winning while boxer B is winning. What social media and the media environment that you spoke about that puts downward pressure on actual
institutions.
It's also kind of I'll get to it in a second, but why it's so brilliant and why it changes outcomes is not just that your 1984 big screen TV yelling at people about telling you what to think. They're getting you to participate in the gaslighting. This is why masks are the most brilliant, the most brilliant psychological warfare tool ever devised by anyone, because you've enabled and encouraged the participation with an outward sign of compliance and an outward sign of force. You've manipulated the population to be your soldiers. And this is exactly what's happening in the Chauvin case, right? Or the Floyd case, however you want to put it. You're through social media and through the conditioning, you are not the effectiveness of a manslaughter conviction, because what I think will happen is they actually can't produce enough evidence to result in a murder conviction.
Murder 2 is not going to work.
I don't believe that a manslaughter, based on the evidence that I know, which I'm somewhat ignorant of, absolutely, but from the facts that I can see from the policies you described, from the resisting arrest series of events,
got the use of force trainer to admit to, when seen at alternate camera angles, that the knee was on the shoulder blade and not the neck.
And
they also dug up photos of MMA Jones, whatever his name, I don't remember his real name, of him not only being physically restrained while yelling and threatening at the officers at the scene, but later at riots.
Right.
So there's more and more that keeps coming.
The toxicology report, the history of um, arrest-induced panic, which he has. All that is to say.
They also got the use of force instructor. Sorry, this is all just coming back
Yeah.
when I blanked on it earlier. They also got him to admit that he has seen personally, and he knows of other officers in which restrained and unconscious suspects regain consciousness and attack the arresting officers.
So right, and and again, they did not call to arrest him. They called EMS.
Yeah.
They
took him out of the car.
Correct.
Put him on the ground.
That's right. So that all that is to say, I don't believe that the evidence would warrant a manslaughter.
I don't think it does either. In a purely legal sense, I don't think.
But
so.
what I do believe will happen is this environmental gaslighting through the media, and it's not just the media's the progenitor. It's I don't want to put percentages on it, whatever.
Yeah.
The media's 20% of it.
Yeah.
That's all you need is 20%, because the rest of the 80% is the willing ideological participation of the public, the mob, if you will. And this is what the framers recognize: is why democracy is stupid. This is what the whole thing. All of the things that we talk about.
Why they only let landowners vote?
Yeah, I mean, I really. That's right.
Yeah.
I think you should be. I think you have to have an income, be married, and own property in order to vote.
Finish what you're saying.
But anyway,
this brings us to something about democracy.
The point is that
the
media doesn't need. All the media has to do. And all the narrative, all the narrative has to do.
Timber's already there.
Is just push it.
Yeah.
Because the other 80% is this willing ideological participation.
Yeah. I don't know if the jurors will.
So what's going to happen is the manslaughter.
I think that's what's going to happen.
That's what's going to happen.
I think.
And that's what's going to happen, despite the justness of our process.
Exactly. I think they don't have the evidence. Doesn't matter. The jurors won't be able to stand up to the
what
I've started calling the beast. Just like
it's.
I don't think it's going to happen. Or in a different scenario, hung jury or mistrial.
Right.
Which might almost be worse, because then we get to do this all over again.
That's probably worse.
It's probably worse, and it will probably have an even worse outcome the second time around.
Yeah.
But it just. We're talking about democracy, right? Like, this is one of the big problems we talk about a lot with, like, sending your kids off to be brainwashed when they're 5 years old. You get taught that democracy is the most important, best, wonderful thing in the entire world. Right. And, like, even your kids' history classes, going back to, like, ancient Greece and stuff, talk about Athens and the roots of democracy and how amazing it was. And I'm sure that pederasty and killing your neighbors every summer was really great, guys.
Right.
Awesome.
Right.
Why should 51% of the country voting to enslave the other 49% via taxes and legislation be a good thing?
Well, and it's also from a framers' perspective. The framers
didn't want democracy. No, I'm not talking about.
I'm
talking about that. I'm talking about the general public now, and like our educational institutions, and like the dominant part of government.
Well, and they use the term democracy incorrectly.
Yes, they use it incorrectly all the time.
History teachers say that we're a democracy, which is not true.
Yeah, and that's the problem. We're not. And the idea that, like, a majority of people get together and decide to take away my liberties is not freedom. That's not the political system or governmental system we're supposed to be in, as much as, like, the fucking neo-Marxists want it to be.
Yes.
Right? And when you apply democracy to things like trials, that's when you get, like, Chelsea Handler tweeting, "Why are we even having a trial?"
Correct.
I don't know, because we have due process?
Yeah, that's right.
Like, these are the same people who, when Mattress Girl was
because
running around...
Because the alternative is lynch mobs.
Yeah. These are the same people who, when we had Mattress Girl in UVA carrying around her mattress, talking about how she got raped and she was going to carry around Columbia. Carrying around her mattress until she got justice for it. It came out to be a hoax. Yeah. All those people said we shouldn't have a trial either.
That's right.
Right? Just lock the kid up and throw him away. Just make the mob feel better.
UVA, which is right.
And I think was it Seattle or... Yeah, Duke lacrosse. Yeah. Was it Seattle or Portland where recently... Guy drove his car through the Antifa blockade. They pepper sprayed him, broke his windows. Yes. He got out, took out a gun to get them all to go away, and the police arrested him.
Yes.
Right? They watched the whole thing.
Yes.
They saw everything from multiple angles, and they arrested him.
Yes.
They didn't intervene when people were breaking his windows. They didn't intervene when he was getting pepper sprayed.
Correct.
They didn't intervene when people were threatening his life and property. They arrested him. The point being, if the mob shows up, for you, and it becomes a problem where you have all legal entitlements and legal rights, and you did nothing wrong. It's not going to matter because it's easier to arrest you.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they did arrest the rioters in Seattle, the DA would let them out with no charges the next day, right?
Correct.
So like the notion of like we are a nation of laws and systems and institutions is like totally fucking gone. And it's been gone for a long time. And, you know, we'd have to go to some serious, like, professional historical analysis to find out precisely when.
Yeah.
But, like, the idea of, like, if you're in the right, there's a system that's going to protect you is all fucking gone, dude.
I wonder...
We already are in lynch mobs and mob rule.
Yeah.
Instead of torches and pitchforks, they're using social media
right.
and George Soros-funded district attorneys, right?
I agree with 90% of that.
Yeah.
My question on the 10% is, do we have I lean towards yes, but do we have a fundamentally broken institution of application of law enforcement across the country? Or do we have particularly deviant and cowardly departments in the Pacific Northwest specifically, who are visible? My question is, it also there aren't consistent Antifa demonstrations that allow to go, 90 days, 100 days, years
beyond leftist strongholds.
It's not in Arkansas. It's not in...
It gets shot.
Right. So I just hold up a little bit, saying, because I think specificity matters.
Yeah.
And this is also where I fall away from the ANCAP libertarian party, even though I have way more sympathy for them than I used to.
Well, this is why I'm for balkanization. Right?
Yeah, right.
Because so here's my response. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, that's probably my
No, should we throw the baby out with the bathwater? Probably not.
Yeah.
The thing is, like what if we want to identify like the contributing factors that like lead to the kind of misinformation and politicization and rabble rousing of like the Chauvin case, right?
Yeah.
The George St. Floyd,
right?
You would need to strip down and rebuild the press, the universities, the law enforcement institutions, the state attorney's office, the district attorney's office. So you're looking at like some of the most major institutions in our country, which like they don't exactly change overnight. And like these infiltrations have been going on for decades, right? Like when the Soviet Union was still around. Without getting into the Yuri Bezimov speech and they were going to win through cultural conversion and all the other bullshit, right? Not really bullshit, but you get my point. How do we do that when the entire machine is revved up to fuck you in the ass, right? Like, how do you deconstruct the universities did you see what happened with Albion University recently?
Yes.
The fake hate crime that got proven to be a hoax and the students are still marching.
Here's the thing, guys. Yeah. This is why I always go back to speech. Always, every time. Yeah. They're all fake.
Yeah, I mean, a lot Jewish guys get caught spray painting swastikas on synagogues all the time.
They're all fake.
And I would imagine a lot of the university ones are.
No. They are all fake. There is the whites. This is where the postmodernists, and I always come back. You always come back to anarchy and balkanization. I always come back to speech, basically, speech or religion. There's two prongs, and speech. The fundamental, the two poles that I speak of phenomenologically are speech and postmodernism, because you can't talk about one without the other, and the forces for good, which is what we talk about and what we promote, are for speech. It is not censorship that is the enemy of free speech, it's postmodernism. And what I mean by that is what they don't want to do, I just came up with this, so bear with me. What they don't want to do, ultimately, is limit your speech. They want to fundamentally alter the nature of language so that they don't have to censor anything. term white supremacy is now the postmodern catch-all for any institution, person, activity, behavior, culture that has to be eliminated. That's what white supremacy is. Mm-hmm. That's why you see, this is what, did you see that? Was it Kristen Gillibrand? The paid family leave is infrastructure. Healthcare is infrastructure.
Everything's infrastructure.
This is what postmodernism is.
Yes.
And this is it's not censorship. It's postmodernism.
I agree. I agree with everything you said. I'm a big fan of James Lindsay, who talks exactly about that, about how language is the fundamental one of the fundamental blocks of everything they're doing.
Right.
And this is one of the reasons why I don't think the baby salvageable in the bathwater.
Yeah, maybe. Okay.
Like is that the
right?
Yeah. Okay. We are not going to have sufficient public pressure or impetus to get people to change law enforcement, courts, DAs, state's attorneys, universities, social media companies, big tech, and more importantly, as we've seen over the last year and a half, even if there was, they wouldn't let you. Right?
Yeah.
People tried to have impetus to change and stop illegal, immoral things happening on January 6th, and it's being turned into a new 9/11, where they're starting Watergate-style commissions and labeling people domestic terrorists and not letting them leave their states or get on planes. Right? So... And more importantly, that's two more importantly's. Even more importantly than more importantly, why would people in red states want to?
Yeah.
Why, if I live in Missouri or Arkansas or Texas or Florida or Idaho, why the fuck would I want to spend my tax money, my human resource capital? Why would I want to spend my any kind of new tech development, any resources? Why would you want to spend any resources fixing Portland or Seattle?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Why?
Yeah.
I don't. And that's what's happening right now with the COVID bailouts.
Yeah.
Right? Like it happened with the first one, it's going to happen with the next one. The blue states bankrupted themselves by shutting themselves down for a year and a half, and now they're going to make the red states bail them out. Right? And then they're going to go on Twitter and talk about how broke all the red states are.
Right.
Right? So, one, people don't want to fix. People either don't know, don't care, or are so brainwashed and propagandized, they don't think any of these institutions need fixing, right? Because they're on the right side of history.
Yeah.
Right? The people who aren't brainwashed are completely disenfranchised. They're censored, they're deplatformed, they're arrested, they're harassed in media, they're doxxed by the New York Times, right? And the ones who are able to resist that, why would they have any reason to invest in changing the parts of the country that hate them and want them dead?
So here's my why. I know why.
And I get the argument that, they need to do that because it's for the good of the republic and the country can't stand if we keep allowing these people to sow discord. And my problem with that is the people sowing discord want you to come after them.
Yeah, that's right. We have a victim culture where
they want it from the sense that they can say, I'm harassed, I'm a victim, I'm threatened. You can't, and you're seeing this right now with journalists like Taylor Lazar and all these other people.
Glenn Greenwald
and Michael Tracy and Aaron Mattei are ripping to shreds. And Matt Taibbi are ripping to shreds these people who are coming after Substack, people who work for major institutions, who then turn around and say, I'm a victim, I'm being threatened and harassed and doxxed, right? Which, just to go back to the Chauvin thing, the New York Times ran an article called "Who are the jurors in the Derek Chauvin trial? Here's what we know so far." So you have the paper of record in the United States doxing the jurors in the most explosive trial in the last 20 years. Right? Fuck.
Well, so here's my question.
Fired up.
Here's my question, and it's a question. So I understand when my computer breaks, I don't. The first thing I check is that I can replace a component part. I don't throw the computer out and buy a new one. Generally, sometimes you do have to do there, and you do, and the argument may be presented to me by you.
What if you go to the shop that fixes your computer, and they tell you everything's working fine, and actually it's your fault?
That's a good point.
For being born the color you are and the gender you are, and that's why your computer broke in the first place. And that if maybe you spent more of your time trying to fix and enrich the computers of other people who were less fortunate of you,
Right.
Then maybe we could fix your computer.
I hear your analogy, but it's different than the analogy I'm making.
I know.
It's okay. The analogy I'm making is, are we actually... The answer may be yes, by the way.
Yeah.
Are we actually at the point where... And let me finish.
Mm-hmm.
Are we actually at the point where we need to buy a new computer? Or we do on paper, and I get that it's on paper, and a lot of those are paper tigers, Constitution is a gun-free zone, all that. Are we at the point where we need to buy our new computer? Even if we do have a federalist system with 50 states, with 50 is there enough ingrained balkanization through the state system that's worth salvaging more than a Michael Malice style restart of true balkanization? That's my question. The question is, we do have Florida and Texas.
Can we maintain the current system of states saying, fuck you, we're going to do what we want?
I don't want to say maintain because it's not working very well.
Yeah.
How do we tweak that rather than, okay, now we have North America and we change it from West Coast to East Coast?
I mean,
Do you understand my question?
Yeah.
We do have, my point, here's my quick point. We do have balkanization. Mm-hmm. They're called states.
We need to,
does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And I think there are a few decent signs that could happen with people like DeSantis and Noem
and Abbott.
Abbott. But where I see issues are Asa Hutchinson in Arkansas.
Let me push back on that a little bit. Now,
he did work for the DEA.
Let me push back on that a little bit, though.
Yeah.
That is almost the most perfect example of how government should work. Because you have a legislative body legislating. You have an executive body going against the will of the legislature, and the legislator having the infrastructure to override the governor. That's almost perfect. It's actually better than if the governor... Now, we can quibble about, should we remove him personally? Probably. But that that beta test for process is pretty perfect. You should want... This is what separation of powers is. It's like, okay, that's fucking excellent. And it's excellent because the legislature won. Perfect.
Okay.
This is how states should actually work.
Yeah. And sometimes they don't, and they end up like Ralph Northam in Virginia.
I agree with you.
Currently, if you look at the balance
I'm just saying
sheet,
that example.
If you look at the balance sheet, there are more states going the way of Ralph Northam in Virginia than Arkansas or Abbott in Texas or DeSantis in Florida.
There are,
right?
yes.
So I'm not very hopeful.
Yeah.
Because most states, even in red states, are just going to fall in line. And for like a more like real example, look at drunk driving laws and interstate highway funding. There were a number of states that said we're not adopting these new drunk driving laws. And they said, okay, you don't get any highway money. So what happens? This is kind of a hypothetical that might seem crazy, but
no, there's a hypothetical like that's going on right now, which I'll tell you about.
Okay. What I would foresee going on, right? Because like the culture war is so big right now. What happens when a Biden administration or a Harris administration or whatever jury-rigged Democrat administration comes in next, says to people, okay, you don't want to do trans health care? Medicare, Medicaid. Pull it.
I'll tell you the example. Okay.
Yeah.
So right now...
Whichever part comes from the federal government. I know that states have their own Medicaid.
Yeah.
And
this is
and stuff like that, but, Social Security, stuff like that.
This example is happening right now. So the Biden administration, based on an initiative that essentially did fail during the Obama administration, essentially withholds federal housing federal infrastructure dollars to states that continue to allow zoning for single-family residences.
What did we talk about a couple episodes ago?
Yes.
They don't want you to have a house. They don't want you to have a family.
Yep. So this is what's happening right now.
I remember reading about that shit before he got elected. It was one of the many things that
you
talk about. People said you're a conspiracy theorist.
Yes, and he also lied. So it came up, and he lied about it, and lied and said no, we won't do. Basically, got caught in it and said we won't do that because everyone now it was.
Just like
again,
all the
this was
crazy shitty
this was a good. Why it never got off the ground, and it'll be interesting to see where this goes because it is new. Why it didn't get off the ground under the Obama administration is basically the states said like fuck you.
Yeah.
They did push back.
Good.
Even and particularly, and this is where it's kind of funny is not the right word, but this is where it's interesting and why self-interest is good is who pushed back the hardest were lobbying groups in blue states, particularly New York, because New York does it because you don't make any money.
Yeah.
They said, we don't care about the federal money. We'd rather have developers build single-family homes and residences and that's our revenue.
Yeah.
Particularly New York. New York only has any money, from taxing the shit out of development, particularly.
Yeah.
That's really it. Because so much industry has moved from New York. There is no industry in New York. So basically, New York only gets income from individuals.
The GE plant shut down decades
And
ago.
they only get income from individuals, high net worth individuals, and basically real estate and property development.
Yeah.
That's the only way. And now it's the same way with California. So it's interesting because the red states basically said, fuck you, like we don't like it, and it doesn't matter, and we don't want your money anyway.
Yeah.
The blue states said, no way, because if you do that, you'll eliminate our actual source of income. So the actual source of income was more than any of the federal carrot dollars that they could wave in front of them. Now, so you see that and you're like, oh, like you sort of make a sigh of relief to say like, holy, this is actually like a bipartisan and again, at the end of the day, like I don't care what your motivations are. If it doesn't happen, I'm happy.
Right. Well, I mean,
but now it's interesting. Yes. I don't know. So now,
I'd be happy too, but how many issues have that kind of reverse financial incentive?
Yeah, not enough.
A lot, and as we've seen that a lot of these culture war issues, they don't have a reverse financial incentive, which is why Coca-Cola and all these companies are fine getting on Twitter and virtue signaling.
That's right.
Right? Because it only stands to benefit them.
Yep.
Donald Trump isn't going to stop drinking Coke.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right. So this is
I think that's good.
Yeah.
But my hesitancy is how many issues is the Fed going to be willing to do that for? And I think that number's only going to go up over time.
Oh, it's not.
And how many states are willing to take a stand that isn't based on the fact that powerful groups in the state stand to lose a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I don't think we can govern. This is why I'm not with the libertarians anymore. I don't think we can govern based on thinking, well, there will be a good enough financial incentive, or not even financial, but there'll be a good enough value incentive to get enough people to stand up against this to stop it.
Absolutely, I agree.
And with the games that the corporate press and big tech plays, I don't think there will be that many different diverse lobbying groups standing up against these things in blue states. When we're talking about like trans healthcare, or like what we see. I don't know if you saw the story about Brigham and Women is going to start doing racial preferential medicine. They're going to be diverting resources into more racial affirmative care.
Yep.
Now, what I've learned recently from people in my life who are more involved in the science industry is that when a lot of medical, like all the studies and tests that a lot of our medications and treatments are based off of are almost 50 years old. A lot of them were done in the 70s and the 80s, some of them in the 90s, and that because of like standards of testing and procedure, you need to have the most consistent control group possible.
Right.
Most of these studies were done within one race group.
Right.
And when these studies were done, the healthiest race group was white people, right? So there are some legitimate concerns about, hey, if we're going to be getting people diabetes medicine and hypertension and blood condition medicine and gastrointestinal medications, which are more prevalent in the black community, right? Like I'm from a mixed family. My mom's half and half. She has a lot of issues that even though she's ate healthy and exercised and was never a smoker or a drinker or anything, things that happen, right? That doesn't happen for other black people, right? That would be worth saying, all right, maybe we should look at funding some new research into more diverse subject groups to get more accurate medical treatment. I don't really think the pharmaceutical industry is interested in doing that. I don't really think the biotech industry is doing that because that's kind of going backwards.
Right.
Whereas they want to go forward into new technologies to where these problems don't really matter in the first place. Right? Or they just protect their profit margins if those technologies don't work and they can make a write-off on it.
Right.
But I don't think that's what Brigham and Women's is trying to do.
No,
I think they're
not.
literally just trying to break off more resources for different ethnic groups and like maybe that means you have longer wait times. Maybe that means you have different access to care. I don't really know. It's a new program that has just gotten authorization based on the advocations of 2 teachers at Harvard Medical School.
Well, and the other example of this and why it's ideologically based and not science based is, you have Vermont who prioritized whatever BPIOC, Black,
BIPOC,
Indigenous, whatever.
Alphabet people.
That's right. Chappelle's pretty good. They prioritize them for vaccinations. Now you can talk about vaccinations and what that means and whether you should get it or not.
Let's prioritize people with one of the highest vaccine hesitancy.
But the point is, we are using racial, and the other piece, which is funny, which is like the eat their own pieces. You only have to identify as, and this is where, again, this is where he's not the first one to do this. I think, probably I was the first one to do this, 10, 15 years ago, is when the same reason you should have hesitancy over self-identification in the trans space is because academically and postmodern, and from a postmodern perspective, you can't differentiate that between race or age or whatever. So the Vermont diktat was if you are a Black or whatever person, it was if you identify as a Black or whatever person, and if that is the standard of what does that even mean? And when people said 10 years ago, the big person who who kind of made it popular was Ben Shapiro, saying, well, if I can be, and this was the Rachel Dolezal thing, and what academically you can't tell me that people can accurately self-diagnose, gender, incorrect gender assignment, and also not self-diagnose incorrect racial assignment, incorrect age assignment, any of these things.
Yeah. There was a woman who identified as a blind person, and she sought out several doctors to blind her, and they would not do it until she found a psychologist who would do it for her. So she couldn't find a regular doctor to do it. They said, you're fucking crazy. Until she found a doctor for crazy people who said, I'll pour noxious chemicals into your eyes.
So it's and this is where
I went at home, Googled John Money.
Oh, who's that?
He's one of the pioneers of gender reassignment surgery. And his famous experiment was in the 50s. He took 2 identical twins and he gender swapped one and then made them have simulated sex acts with each other, and they both later killed themselves. And his research was the foundation for most modern transgender science.
There was actually
John Money.
There's an what was I going to say?
If people can change their gender, self-diagnose, they can do it with their race.
What I was going to say, thank you. What I was going to say, so let's even take that out of it. So this is where I want to get your thoughts, because you're better at hashing this out than I am. I'm now big, and most of it's just fun, in kind of the anarcho-capitalist, libertarian internet culture, which is shitposting and memes and being funny and the whole thing. There's also a couple podcasts that I've started listening to, which are okay, like the Dave Smiths of the world. And this goes back to another conversation we had maybe 2 episodes ago, which I really like, where I said the difference between kind of progressives and conservative. I think fundamentally it was religious people and then sort of atheists, but then downstream of that it was conservative people and then progressives. Was religious people or conservatives see 2 fundamental forces of nature, which are disaster, which is which is non-prime mover, which is the result of a non-prime mover. It hails just because there's just disasters. And then there is malevolence, which means that there is a prime mover. It's somebody's fault. A bad actor has pushed this disaster into the universe. And conservatives and religious people recognize that and say there are 2 forces that we have to deal with. and we have to manage disaster because disasters are inevitable and are part of life, and we have to manage them. We have to manage around them. But we also have to recognize that there is evil in the world and malevolence, and we have to fight that. You don't manage evil, you fight evil. Now, I think, whereas on the flip side of that, sort of liberals, progressives, globalists, don't believe in malevolence. They just believe that they think that evil is a social construction. That nobody actually does. Pedophiles are not evil. They are
improperly socialized.
They're a result of our culture. They're a result of they're a result of social forces. There's no such thing as a bad person.
In this analogy, the liberals they only believe in disaster?
They don't believe in
But
malevolence.
if they blame white supremacy for everything, isn't that malevolence?
No,
and
because
isn't
white
your
supremacy
personal participation in systems of racism malevolence?
No, because malevolence is a social construction.
Okay.
Because evil only happens if you don't condition people the right way.
Yeah, because to me it just seems that conservatives or religious people have more of a framework for how to attribute disaster and malevolence that's based on like certain objective truths, right? And liberals seem to just kind of want to determine what is malevolence and what is disaster arbitrarily based on what suits their ideology.
Maybe that's a better way to put it.
Yeah.
Maybe. I still, maybe. I'd have to tease that.
I'm not rejecting it.
Yeah. No, it's a good, yeah. So that's actually not ultimately.
I derailed you. Keep going.
No, that's okay. But that's not ultimately the point I wanted to make. Okay. The point I wanted to make was that I think libertarians fall on that delusional side as well because they believe that there is no such thing as malevolence. And if we only had a system that is just, malevolence wouldn't exist. And that's the same thing that's why people promote communism. That's why they say if the system is appropriate, malevolence can't creep in. Maybe it's that way. Maybe it's not that libertarian. Actually, you know what? That's a very good point that you helped me make. It's not that progressives or libertarians don't believe in maliciousness. Progressives or libertarians believe that a system can be created that will keep malevolence out. Yeah. And conservatives recognize that there is no infrastructure that can keep malevolence out.
Yeah, and it goes back to what Thomas Sowell says. There are no solutions, only trade-offs.
Yeah,
like you're always going to have problems. You're always going to have issues economically, socially, culturally, politically. Yeah. And there are not going to be end-all solutions that are going to fix all or even a majority of your problems. Yes. And like the idea of a governance or in a smaller scale community and society is how are you going to work together to solve the problems that you've determined are the most important for you, right? And like the problems that are going to have the widest range of effects on your society. Right. And part of politics is that people disagree about what are the most important problems. Right. And I think the libertarians think that the end-all solution is just limited small government, pro-liberty principles, and then nothing will go wrong ever again.
Correct.
And the progressive version...
that's just as delusional.
And as the progressive delusion of once we have top-down leftist government that controls everything, then we can ensure equality and nothing bad will... or equity, and nothing bad will ever happen ever again. Exactly. And they both discount the uncanny and unstoppable capacity in the human spirit for malevolence and chaos. Yes. And that, like, you cannot have order without chaos, and you can't have chaos without order. They're, like, fundamentally entwined in, like, the nature of our being. Correct. And no amount of censorship or no amount of liberty is going to stop the fact that is going to undo that. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly my point. And this is where I disagree with the pure liberty argument. You know, the other side of it is pure liberty. You're eventually going to have Dr. John Money. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. So that's exactly right. I'm just thinking this out too. Is I want degree, and this is why I always say and come back to it. I mean, I am a cultural authoritarian. Now, the flip side of this is where, like, I kind of I don't know where
my switch, like there is a switch where I want, like I'm pretty high cultural authoritarianism. And also, this is something that this guy Reed Coverdale talks about, which is good.
He was on Dave Smith the other day.
Yes.
I didn't watch the episode yet. But
he's pretty good.
I was planning to.
He's pretty good. Is he
a Libertarian Party guy? Who is Reed Coverdale?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar.
No, he's not a party guy. He does naturalist capitalist, which is good.
Yeah.
I mean, he's good. I mean, he's
a gorist light.
Yeah, where we disagree. Yeah, where we disagree is like religious stuff.
Yeah.
And this is where I disagree with the liberty movement doesn't have a good argument about the John Moneys of the world.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a good argument about the fact that they don't have a sophisticated enough argument. And they get the first part of the argument right about like drugs. It's like the first part of the argument they are right.
And the majority of the libertarian movement right now also doesn't have an answer for woke corporatism.
Correct.
The Mises Caucus does, the Dave Smiths do, but they are still the minority in the party, right?
Certain I need to learn more about Mises.
Ludwig von Mises, great. It's Austrian economics. It's fantastic.
Right.
But they don't have an answer for woke capitalism.
Correct.
And real libertarians understand that the latitude that the corporations have been given over the last few decades has caused a fusion with the state into this corporatist, quasi-fascist oligarchy that we have now.
Absolutely.
And it's really easy for lefties on Twitter to fucking wreck the current libertarians by telling them they suck corporate cock, because they do.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And it's only the people in the Mises Caucus and the Dave Smiths of the internet who are willing to say, no, this isn't what libertarianism is about. These people are a bunch of fucking traitors.
And this is where you can't just, and this is why the argument isn't a good, sophisticated one. Mm-hmm. You get the front end right, which is, should we have a war on drugs?
No.
Definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
Should we have a culture that says drugs are? This is kind of like the it's like did you ever read Cracked, like back in the day?
Yeah.
It now is horrific.
Awful.
It's horrific.
Been that way for a while.
For a long time.
Yeah.
Way earlier, there was this guy who I remember. His blog name was called John Cheese.
I remember. Yep.
Yeah. And he was pretty good. I mean, definitely lefty and not kind of like a Jimmy Dore lefty.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And he had a really good take back then, and I don't even know if I'd actually agree with this now, but I like the instinct, which is the pro-legalization weed folks. For a long time, it seems the argument was this is they made the medical argument almost exclusively. They said weed is good. Weed is good for you. Weed cures cancer. Weed is and his point was, you can't tell the story about weed without saying that it's like medical uses. There's probably some, but they're not. But that's not to the degree you're saying. You're also just lying to get what you want, and you can't say that like weed in aggregate like makes people more productive.
No, it does.
Like that's ridiculous.
Yeah, the whole
that's not true.
The entire pro-weed argument should be an anti-prohibition argument.
Exactly.
It shouldn't be a pro-weed is awesome and great for you. It's the government has no right to regulate what kind of plants you decide to grind up and burn and inhale.
This is why I said the first part of the argument's really good.
Beyond making sure you're like not selling it to children.
Yes.
Beyond like fulfilling their governmental obligation to protect people who are not of sound mind to make their own decisions.
Yes.
Which is like if like in Pineapple Express where Seth Rogen sells a bunch of weed to 8th graders.
Yeah.
He should have gotten arrested by that police officer.
Yeah.
And they made it like a chase scene of him getting away, and it's like, oh, he got away. Dude, you just sold weed to 13-year-olds behind a high school.
Correct. Not
like,
good.
what the fuck, dude?
Yes.
And I like weed.
Absolutely.
Like, I'm pro-weed.
Totally.
Don't sell it to kids.
So this is
right?
So the liberty.
So beyond that, there should be no prohibition of it. But saying that it's good for you, come on, dude.
The liberty movement doesn't get there. They only
grinding up plants and inhaling the fumes is not good for your lungs.
This is what I'm like. This is where I always go back to, and I'm like, so what you're describing and what I'm describing, even though maybe not me because I don't care. Some people, many people in the liberty movement would say, well, that's cultural authoritarianism, and I'm like, yeah, it is, and it's way better than not. You know what I mean?
Non-prohibition?
No,
not letting kids get high.
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's cultural authoritarianism.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what it fucking definitely is.
Yeah.
And you know what?
Don't
It's
let kids get high.
definitely way better from an outcomes perspective. You know, and why I brought up Reed Coverdale, who was pretty good. And again, we don't agree on everything, but he's pretty good, and I like his instincts on a lot of things. Is just because I don't like something and not want people to do it doesn't mean I should make it illegal. And that's a really good argument. That's what the argument is. But what so many libertarians fall back on is, well, private company, they can do whatever you want. It's like the idea that you shouldn't have an opinion.
Tread harder on me, corporate daddy.
Yeah, exactly. The idea that you shouldn't have an opinion on evil actors is stupid. You know, and this is where I go back to, like, well, you know, the defund abolish police thing. It's like, do I want to fundamentally restructure what policing is? Yes. Do I think a state, like the idea that no third party contract law enforcement agency is good? Is like, no. That, you know, like, we shouldn't allow strong people to rip off weak people. Like, that's fucking stupid.
Yeah.
You know, and a liberty movement that says that, ultimately, that is what I get what, like, the Malices say, and they're right, and they're new Malice isn't like this. But
Malice is not a libertarian.
I know that's right.
He gets very offended when people refer to him as a libertarian.
Correct. This is my point. It's you.
Dave Smith has started calling himself an anarchist.
Exactly.
He doesn't identify as much with the libertarian.
Correct, and I like Dave Smith, and again, there are things I disagree with, but whatever. But the point is, like, you have this instinct in this liberty movement that says liberty. It's the same delusion that communists have. It's, if we would only change this infrastructure, everything would be perfect.
Yeah. And
it's like, no, it wouldn't. Yeah. And B, or how should I say this? A, you actually probably wouldn't want it if you thought about it. And B, it can't. Because there are no systems that would just fix things.
You can go on Twitter and you can see people talk, like, there are all sorts of threads that say, like, what would your job be in a communist system, right?
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, I'll have a farm and I'll sew uniforms. It's you won't have anything.
Yeah. Right, correct.
You won't have anything.
Yeah.
You'll get the job the government assigns you to do.
Exactly.
And if you don't like it, you'll go to the gulag.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
So yeah, most people don't know what they're interested in or advocating for or talking about.
Right.
And, like, for most of them, I don't think they care. They just realized, oh, I'm 32 years old and I can't really like Rick and Morty and Legos anymore. So I guess I'll talk about communism on the internet to try to get laid.
And it's the same token on this liberty side.
Yeah.
And listen, if I, like, had to pick one, I'm picking the liberty side.
Yeah.
Like, duh.
Yeah.
You know, like, that's not...
The liberty side lets you keep your gun.
That's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
That's not what we're talking about here. It's me, because I'm annoying and contrarian, and I have to poke holes in anything I like, is that I see this and I see these conversations, and I don't see the same type of nuance in their conversations that I do, and I know I suck his dick constantly, as in, like, the Peterson argument. The Peterson argument is he's upfront about, like, no, it mostly sucks. This will not, like, fix anything.
Yeah.
And even if you do it exactly like I tell you, it's still probably not going to work.
Embrace the suck.
Yeah, it's still probably not going to work.
I think that's huge. That, like, it,
you know,
and this isn't and people talk about how nihilist everybody is and, like, how fucking depressed everyone is, and, like, that's true to a degree. Maybe because they're pumping kids full of SSRIs and Adderall when they're 10 years old, and then putting them in hypersexualized, non-socialized environments with no sorts of ambitions or institutions to lean on for community and support.
Man, I really am rubbing off on you.
Right?
You're rubbing off on me, but I'm rubbing off on you.
Like, and people, and we're told our whole lives, like, you're going to be an astronaut, you're going to be a president, you're going to be a CEO. You're not told, like, you're going to be an insurance agent, or you're going to be an accountant, or you're going to be a mason.
You're looking at it.
Or
this is my White House.
Or you're going to be a middle manager at a company. Like, no one prepares you for, like, the suck. No one prepares you for, like, the existential dread of like, embracing your own mediocrity, which is like a big thing Peterson talks about.
All the time.
He's like, you have to embrace that if you want to be better.
Absolutely.
Like, if you want to work to be better, you have to first say, I'm not good enough.
That's right.
And like, realizing...
Yeah, he calls it like the self-esteem
Yeah,
complex.
realizing that, okay, life kind of sucks. It's an empowering thing.
Absolutely.
It's
mostly tragic.
It's a tragedy. Life is full of tragedy. And this doesn't mean that you should walk around sad and moping and thinking nothing's ever going to get better. It's okay. I've accepted this.
Yes.
I've accepted that this sucks. Now, what am I going to do to make it better, or to, at least to make myself feel better about it? And like, you recognize that you are like the master of your own domain.
And there's a real difference.
And you can take more pleasure when things don't suck.
Correct. Yeah. And it's where like, I'm doing a lot of this where I'm coming up with these things and teasing them out. So it's not going to be perfect.
Yeah,
how I describe it.
You do that a lot.
It's like what dignity means, right? Like, I don't know that you can be dignified if you're at the top of the hierarchy. So they
certainly think they are.
The elites,
they are.
But and this is like what I'm getting at. Like the person at the, and I'm not saying you shouldn't strive to get there. But it's also the pursuit of happiness, which is what makes it important. But whatever, that's a different thing. Dignity means you have developed the appropriate response mechanisms to it's really about gratitude. To obtain the appropriate amount of gratitude based on your station, right? That's what dignity is. Like, you wouldn't describe... Maybe I'm wrong about this. I don't think you generally describe, like, the CEO of the company as having dignity.
They can certainly act dignified.
Yeah.
But I kind of see where you're...
But I think... Let me just finish this.
Yeah.
But I do want to hear your thoughts on it. But you do think of the middle manager as being dignified. And this is what I mean by that. That person is not at the top of the dominance hierarchy. But they appreciate that they're also not at the bottom,
right?
And they act in a way that projects to the world that they are grateful for what they have.
Right.
That's what I kind of see dignity at. Like you say, like that coal miner, that guy's got a lot of dignity. Like, he doesn't compromise. He doesn't. He doesn't
that speaks to our differences.
He doesn't want to. He doesn't want to ball wash to get to the top.
Yep.
He appreciates the station and is grateful for the station, and that's what, like, dignity is. It's like
the CEOs, the elite people, that they compromised a certain degree of their beliefs or principles or feelings or home life or whatever.
Correct, and it's a trade-off.
To where they are,
and it's a trade-off.
And that goes back to what we talk about with sacrifice, right?
It's the only story there is.
Is it more noble to sacrifice the opportunity to be great in order to be happy?
Yes.
And that's I feel like that's something we could take hours to days to unpack.
What did you say you and I fundamentally disagree on?
Maybe not fundamentally. Maybe we do agree. I think I just wasn't letting you get the full thought out. That, like, I think we do agree. I don't think we disagree. Okay. I find the coal miner far more dignified than the middle manager or the CEO.
Oh, that means yes.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't think I jumped the gun on that one.
The thing that I see, which is funny because I also I talk out of both sides of my. I don't. How do I want to tease this out? I don't want to actually be the CEO, but I want to do everything I can to get to be the CEO.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
And the act of trying to get there produces better results and makes the world better than actually being there.
I also think, and this is my wilder side, that this is a degree of rationalization based on how our pursuits or value or worthiness are contextualized in, like, our rat race, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that I think that this is a relatively new system that we've been placed into and is kind of used to gauge our esteem.
Yes.
Right? And that 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago,
it
wasn't about how high you could rise in the corporate bureaucracy.
Yep.
Or how impressive your LinkedIn profile was.
Yes.
Or how much money you had in your bank. It was people fought in wars and they wrote poems
Yep.
and they explored and they
Yep.
traveled the
Right.
world.
It's the stuff
and
they did,
and
not the
woo-
stuff
yes,
they defined
and they
themselves
wooed
as.
women and they wooed men and
Right.
they saw exotic cultures and they collected trophies and
Right.
and they had Boy Scouts and Elks and Knights of Columbus and churches and bowling leagues
Right.
and they had things that they could invest in and they could get tangible results and intangible results. And now we've been put into such a sterilized society where you need to really go out of your way to get anything that even resembles this kind of in reward on your community investment. Right? And a lot of the systems that you do have are demonized. Like you're a church guy, right?
Yep.
That's no longer seen in a lot of parts of the country as like a good community alternative.
Correct.
To the fucking Politburo Soma fueled. You know.
People think you're a. There's a cultural emphasis on like how many Instagram followers you have.
Yeah.
Rather than
and
now going to church.
And now the things that we are told we need to pursue in order to be successful or happy don't make you successful or happy.
Yes.
In the purest sense of the word.
And absolutely.
You might be rich. You might have a great job. You might have a great title. You might have 5 million Instagram followers. You might be in the top 0.1% on OnlyFans.
Right.
And maybe that makes you happy. Maybe it doesn't.
My argument is that it doesn't.
I don't think.
And those people.
I don't think it does either.
People are lying.
I don't think it does either. And I think this is why people buy new cars every 3 or 4 years. I think this is why people buy boats they can't afford.
Yep.
I think this is why people buy Dolce & Gabbana purses.
Go to Starbucks.
And Gucci flip-flops and $8 lattes.
Mm-hmm.
And we've replaced like our ingrained, not only like our ingrained like human spirit, but also like our enlightenment philosophies of like truth and justice and the pursuit of happiness and enrichment of yourself and once you've enriched yourself to help better your fellow man.
Right.
We've abandoned that for consumerism.
Yeah, and
for cynical consumerism.
Absolutely.
And reality TV.
Yep.
And we wonder why everyone's fucking depressed.
Correct. And it's like the people who the people, and I'm not like perfect and whatever, but it's like, you know, part of it is a practical sense, right? It's like so we don't have Amazon Prime. Mm-hmm. It's like, and we don't, I don't have any subscriptions I don't like buy anything, and I live in a 1,000 square foot house ranch, and we like buy all, and I drive a car that's 10 years old, and the whole thing. And I'm not like, part of this is there's a little bit of like chip on my shoulder where I do want to be, I rationalize that dominance hierarchy by saying I actually have a net worth because of that. Mm-hmm. And like, I see you with your car lease and you don't, mm-hmm. you know, like I don't get like new shit on Amazon all the time. And I don't have look at the clothes I'm wearing, you know, like, but I wear that. Part of that is a rationalization, definitely. But it's also because that stuff does make you a slave. Yeah. And if we want to really talk about like liberty, is like you can't be like that stuff. The people who bitch the most about capitalism get Amazon delivered every week. Yeah. They watch Netflix all the time. They define themselves by Starbucks. Mm-hmm. And it's like I'm gonna do I'll do a little bit of this, which is what a communist wouldn't do, is capitalism does, I know it shouldn't, and academically it's not real I'll listen to all those arguments. I trust me, I have a ton of sympathy for all the like not real capitalism arguments. I have a ton of sympathy for that. But what we do have to you have to recognize, like Thomas Sowell, is capitalism does produce a materialist culture. Mm-hmm. It does emphasize marketing and obtaining trinkets to show other people. Mm-hmm. My argument is at least you're free to make the decision to do it. Correct. And to me is if you steel yourself with dignity and gratitude, you actually don't have to participate in it. and that's the massive difference between that and communism is you don't have the choice.
Yeah.
But I'm also, people say like, well, you must like suck the cock of capitalism, and it's like, no, I fucking don't. Capitalism mostly sucks also.
Yeah.
It's
the least
it's
damaging
just the least
system
terrible
we
one.
found.
Correct.
It's
just, and which is where I don't fall into the libertarian side, where they're like, oh, if it's just free and buy more shit and greed is good, and then everyone was going to be happier. It's like, no, that I don't see any evidence for that.
Well, it goes back to what we're saying as language it's not used as a rational tool for discourse and discussion. It's a tool for control for the postmodernists and the current leftists, right?
Is.
Joe Biden just recently he gave a speech. He talked about how gun violence causes like $180 billion a year for the United States. He's making an economic argument for gun violence. They're just going to make these things say whatever they want them to say.
Correct.
Right?
What? I actually haven't heard that one.
It's a new one.
Was that? Yeah.
So he did a rambling speech about gun control. That it causes like
what?
It causes a bunch. I don't know the exact number of money. It could be millions.
The AFT.
Billions. The AFT. The AFT. He gets a fucking lispy ATF guy who was at Waco to be the ATF director.
I know, who murdered a bunch of babies.
And posed with the picture of the rubble.
It's wild.
And said that anyone who bought a gun during the COVID and BLM riots, that they should store it locked and unloaded behind the dehydrated food and in your bunker because you're a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
Right? So,
fuck you, dude.
real quick, I know you're going to go, but I want
yeah.
to talk about this. We're kind of dropping off what we said, but your boy is now a Nazi in Marvel Comics. Yeah, Jordan Peterson is now Red Skull.
Because, because you have a postmodernist, Ta-Nehisi Coates, who only believes in language.
Who, for some reason, we're hiring journalists to do comics, but okay.
Yeah, correct.
Sure.
I mean, and the good news is there's maybe there's a little bit of like, well, there's a lot with Peterson, which is good, and I'm you know. Is there seems to be an appropriate Streisand effect going on?
Yes, there is.
Where people are very much like cognizant of like okay.
Yeah. And when Jordan tweets about it and people say, "Wow, why are you so obsessed with this?" That it only helps him.
It does.
At first it was bad, and then, like you said, the internet came out as the internet often does, and turned it into a lampoon of itself.
It stepped up. They did step up.
And now the memes have started. With them posting stuff of Jordan
Red Skull says,
clean your room.
Exactly. Yeah. Like it's like, oh, like whatever, fucked around, became a Nazi, and then reconnected with my dad.
Yeah.
Like so. Anyway, all right.
That's good. A good place to stop.
Good job.
Yeah.